Welcome, deep divers. Today, we're wading into some deep and maybe murky waters.
Definitely deep.
We're tackling that persistent whisper, the one that gets thrown around. Sometimes seriously, sometimes, well, not so seriously.
The one about the world's wealthiest people and corporations controlling everything.
Exactly. It often gets brushed off, right? Like, oh, that's just conspiracy talk, tinfoil hats and all that.
Right. Dismissed.
But what if it's not about some secret room where a few guys are pulling all the strings? What if the reality is, well, something more complex, more systemic?
Something maybe even more undeniable once you start looking closely.
That's what we're setting out to do today. This isn't just scratching the surface.
No, this is a proper deep dive. We want to really deconstruct what you might call the architecture of influence.
Architecture. I like that. It implies structure, intent.
Precisely. It's like a scaffolding built using this unprecedented concentration of wealth. We're not just talking about abstract economic figures here.
No, this is about how that sheer, almost unimaginable amount of money gets turned into raw material.
The raw material to build and maintain a global system. A system that, maybe not surprisingly, tends to align things pretty consistently with the interests of a certain group.
A transnational capital elite, as some researchers put it.
Yeah. And again, this isn't necessarily about a hidden, centrally directed plot. It's more like a powerful, self-perpetuating system. Distributed, maybe, but incredibly effective. Chillingly so sometimes.
So what can you, our listeners, expect from this exploration? We're mapping out 4 key areas, all interconnected.
Think of it as a journey through different layers of this architecture.
First, we have to get our heads around the sheer scale, the jaw-dropping amount of wealth and corporate power that forms the base. The foundation.
You can't understand the influence without understanding the resources behind it.
Then, from there, we'll look at how that money gets, well, pretty brazenly converted into political and legal power. How laws get shaped, how justice sometimes seems different for some.
Yeah, the whole machinery of lawmaking and enforcement.
After that, we peel back another layer. The softer side, maybe. The insidious ways public thought is molded, how narratives are controlled. What you hear, what you don't hear.
The soft power, hugely important, shaping the environment ideas operate in.
And finally, we zoom out. We look at the global stage, supranational bodies, elite networks, how this influence extends way beyond any single country's borders.
Projecting that power internationally.
And look, understanding this stuff isn't just, some academic puzzle. It's critical for you.
Absolutely critical. If you want to grasp how the rules of the game are actually set.
Why some stories dominate the news cycle while others vanish.
What it all means for democracy, for fairness, for your own future, really.
Then you need to understand these mechanics. It's about seeing the hidden currents that are steering the ship.
Couldn't have said it better.
Okay, let's get into it. Part 1, the foundation of fortune, extreme wealth, and market monopoly. We're starting at the absolute base, bedrock.
Because you can't build an empire of influence without, well, an empire's worth of resources.
This whole system we're talking about, this architecture,
Yeah.
it rests on a concentration of wealth that is, frankly, just staggering, historically off the charts.
Nothing quite like it. And this massive inequality isn't just a background statistic. It's the active ingredient, the fuel.
The fuel that powers the whole machine. And it's not just personal fortunes over here and corporate power over there, is it?
No, they're deeply intertwined. The rise of billionaire wealth and the rise of market concentration, they feed each other.
Like two sides of the same, very, very shiny coin.
Locked in this feedback loop. More market power means more profits, higher stock prices.
Which means more personal wealth for the people at the top.
Which then gets used to consolidate even more market power or by political influence. It just spirals upwards.
Okay, let's try and quantify this spiral. The global wealth pyramid, a portrait of staggering inequality. Paint us a picture.
Well, imagine the world's wealth. It's not spread out evenly, obviously. It's shaped like a brutally sharp pyramid.
All point, very little base.
Pretty much. Recent data, like from Credit Suisse reports, shows the wealthiest 1.1% of adults. That's around 56 million people globally.
Okay.
They own almost half, 45.8% of total global wealth.
Wait, say that again? 1% owns nearly half of everything.
45.8%. Just let that sink in for a second.
Wow. And the other end, the bottom half, billions of people.
Billions, yeah. They collectively own, wait for it, 1.3%.
1.3%?
Right.
For half the planet.
It's not a gap. It's a canyon. An abyss. Almost impossible to visualize, really.
And this isn't some historical artifact. This picture is getting worse.
Dramatically worse.
Yeah.
And fast. An Oxfam report from early 2024 highlighted this acceleration since just 2020.
Yeah.
The fortunes of the 5 richest men on the planet have more than doubled.
Doubled in just a few years.
While nearly 5 billion people globally actually got poorer.
5 billion people got poorer. That's obscene.
And billionaire wealth overall is growing 3 times faster than inflation. It's pulling away at incredible speed.
So fast. What was that prediction? A trillionaire.
Yeah. Projections suggest the world could see its first trillionaire within a decade.
One person with $1 trillion.
Meanwhile, the estimate for eradicating global poverty, about 230 years at the current pace.
A trillionaire in 10 years, poverty gone in 2 centuries. That contrast is just brutal.
It really is. Just last year, billionaire wealth jumped another $2 trillion. And we saw 204 new billionaires created. That's almost 4 every single week.
Now, for listeners thinking, okay, that's global stuff, maybe it's different here. Let's talk about the U.S. Does it mirror this?
Oh, absolutely. It's a fractal pattern, almost. The U.S. situation is just as stark, if not starker in some ways.
How so?
Look at stocks and mutual funds. Recent Federal Reserve data. The top 10% of U.S. households own 93% of all of it.
93%. Owned by just 10% of households.
And the top 1%, their share of that public equity wealth has climbed from about 40% 2 decades ago to over 54% now.
So the very wealthiest are consolidating their grip on the markets.
Hugely. And if you look specifically at financial wealth, so net worth minus your house, the concentration is even more extreme. The top 1% held nearly 43% a decade back, and it's only gone up.
These numbers are hard to really internalize. They're just so massive.
They are. But the key takeaway isn't just the numbers themselves, it's what they represent.
Which is?
Power. Raw, potential power. This isn't just money sitting in a vault. It's the fuel for everything else we're going to talk about.
Political campaigns.
Armies of lobbyists.
Buying up media outlets.
Setting up massive foundations that can dictate policy agendas globally.
It's the essential starting point, the precondition for building that architecture of influence.
Exactly. You need that foundation of fortune first.
Which leads perfectly into the next bit, monopoly's grip. How market power forges billionaire fortunes.
Yeah.
How does this actually happen? Where does this almost unbelievable wealth come from?
Right, because the common narrative is, hard work, brilliant innovation, taking risks.
The meritocracy story.
The meritocracy story. But when you dig into it, a huge chunk of these astronomical fortunes, especially at the very top, aren't really coming from wages or even standard entrepreneurship in a competitive market.
So where are they coming from?
Overwhelmingly, it seems to stem from this tight, mutually reinforcing relationship between personal wealth and corporate market power.
Okay, unpack that. Market power.
Think monopolies, or near monopolies, dominant positions in key sectors. The fact that market concentration and wealth concentration have risen almost perfectly in tandem since the 1970s, that's not a coincidence.
It's causal.
The evidence strongly suggests it's causal. It's the main engine driving this inequality.
How does that mechanism work?
It's often about the connection between a billionaire's personal wealth and the stock value of the company they control.
Ah, right. Their wealth is the company's stock, essentially.
For many of the biggest names, yeah. Research on the top 50 U.S. billionaires shows over 75% of their wealth is tied up in the equity of companies they have significant control over.
Give us some examples.
Okay, Warren Buffett, 99% of his fortune is Berkshire Hathaway stock. Mark Zuckerberg, 96% Meta stock. Jeff Bezos, 85% Amazon equity, even after diversifying a bit.
So their personal bank account balance rises and falls dramatically with that one stock price.
Exactly. Their fortunes are directly, intensely linked to the performance or perceived performance of their companies in the market.
And you're saying that performance, that soaring stock price, is often driven by market power rather than just, say, selling more widgets.
To a significant degree, yes. Many of these companies are built around capturing what are called economic choke points.
Choke points, like controlling a key piece of infrastructure or technology.
Exactly, and establishing what analysts call a wide economic moat.
Okay, what's an economic moat? Sounds medieval.
It kind of is. It's a durable competitive advantage, something that lets a company ward off competitors, protect its market share, and crucially, extract monopoly rents.
Monopoly rents.
Yeah.
So profits above and beyond what you'd get in a truly competitive market.
Precisely. Because there's no real competition to force prices down or drive innovation as aggressively. These moats allow firms to rake in these excess profits for years, sometimes decades.
And this isn't just a niche thing.
Far from it. Look at the publicly traded companies controlled by the top 50 U.S. billionaires. Almost every single one where data is available is classified as having a wide economic moat.
So the market rewards companies for having these anti-competitive advantages.
Absolutely. Financial markets love moats because they signal predictable, sustained, high profitability. That drives valuations through the roof. Market power translates directly into stock price gains.
Which directly inflates the personal fortunes of the controlling billionaires.
You got it.
This really puts a dent in the meritocracy myth, doesn't it?
It blows a pretty big hole in it, yeah. The idea that extreme wealth is just a fair reward for genius and effort, it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny here.
There was that report you mentioned earlier.
Right, the 2024 Oxfam report, it estimated something like 60% of global billionaire wealth is unearned.
Unearned.
Meaning it comes from things like inheritance, exercising monopoly power, or cronyism, cozy relationships with government that grant favors or protect markets, not necessarily from creating something new or better in a competitive space.
And that figure about young billionaires.
Stark, isn't it? Every single billionaire under the age of 30 inherited their fortune. Every single one.
Wow. So the system seems tilted towards rewarding consolidation and inheritance, not just pure innovation.
It certainly looks that way. It rewards the ability to build and defend that moat. Which brings us to the feedback loop.
Okay, the loop. How does it work?
You have these billionaire block holders, people who own a significant chunk of a company's stock, often 5% or more, and frequently hold top positions like CEO or chair.
But so they have real control over strategy.
Absolutely. And because their personal wealth is so directly tied to that stock price, they have incredibly powerful personal incentives to push the company towards strategies that boost that price.
Which often
means anti-competitive actions. Aggressive mergers and acquisitions to swallow rivals and increase market share, lobbying for deregulation that weakens competitors or raises barriers to entry.
So their personal financial gain aligns perfectly with corporate strategies that might harm consumers or workers or stifle competition generally.
That's the dynamic. Extracting economic rents becomes the goal because it juices the stock price and thus their personal wealth.
Let me see if I can trace this cycle then.
Yeah.
Billionaire block holder uses corporate control.
Yep.
To build the economic moat, maybe through M&A or lobbying.
Right.
That increased market power allows the company to charge higher prices, maybe pay lower wages, generating those monopoly rents.
Super normal profits, yeah.
Which leads to a soaring stock valuation.
Making the billionaire even richer.
And then that newly magnified personal wealth gets plowed back into what? Buying more companies, more lobbying.
All of the above. Strengthening the moat further, buying political access to ensure the rules stay favorable. It's a relentless cycle, escalating dominance.
This feels like a fundamental shift in what value creation even means in the economy.
I think it is. It's moving away from creating genuinely new value through innovation towards extracting existing value through market manipulation and rent seeking.
Taking a bigger slice of the pie rather than making the pie bigger?
Exactly. Traditional economics says wealth rewards better products. But if market valuations explicitly reward companies for fending off competition via moats,
then the reward is for suppressing competition, not winning it fairly.
it seems so. When most new billionaire wealth comes from monopoly, inheritance, or cronyism, it tells you the biggest rewards are going to the consolidators, the manipulators, maybe the well-connected, not necessarily the pure innovators.
It's a shift from productive capitalism to something more extractive.
That's a very apt description. Capitalism based on consolidation, capturing choke points, stifling rivals.
Which is a powerful and honestly pretty damn unsettling picture of how the foundation of fortune is built.
It is.
And that foundation, that immense wealth, is then used. Which brings us straight to part 2. Buying influence, translating wealth into political and legal dominion.
Right. Because that mountain of cash isn't just for buying yachts, is it?
Not primarily, no. Its real potency, its leverage, comes when it's converted into political and legal power.
Shaping the rules of the game.
Exactly. Twisting democratic institutions, maybe even the rule of law itself, to serve the interests of those who hold the purse strings.
And this isn't random. It's systematic. A deliberate translation of economic power into political dominance.
How does that translation happen?
Through a whole architecture, again, targeting every branch of government.
Like what?
Funding campaigns to get the right people elected, using sophisticated lobbying to basically co-write the laws, even influencing the courts, the justice system.
Creating a shadow system, almost.
In some ways, yeah. It all feeds back on itself. Political power helps generate more wealth, which buys more political power, entrenching this sort of de facto oligarchy.
Let's start with the most obvious route, elections.
Hmm.
The campaign cash floodgate, strategic investment in political outcomes. Money in politics isn't new, but something shifted, didn't it?
Dramatically, especially in the U.S. The system has become essentially a marketplace for influence. And the 2010 Supreme Court Citizens United decision was a seismic event.
The one that equated money with speech.
That's the one. It blew the doors open for unlimited spending by corporations and outside groups. The fallout was immediate and massive.
What kind of fallout?
Candidates became incredibly reliant on a tiny number of ultra-wealthy donors. Their agendas started reflecting donor priorities, maybe more than constituent priorities.
How does that work in practice? Two main ways.
Yeah, primarily two vehicles drive this. First, super PACs.
Right. Heard of those?
They're independent expenditure-only committees. Sounds technical, but it means they can raise and spend unlimited money from corporations, unions, individuals, anyone.
Unlimited. So a billionaire can just pour millions into supporting or attacking a candidate.
Exactly. Drowns out the voices of ordinary citizens trying to contribute $20 here or there. It creates this dependency for candidates they need the super PAC money.
And it makes running for office impossible unless you're rich yourself or have connections to these mega donors.
It creates a huge financial barrier to entry. Absolutely.
Okay, so super PACs are one channel. What's the other, maybe sneakier one?
Dark money. The veil of anonymity.
Sounds ominous.
It kind of is, because while super PACs technically have to disclose their donors,
There are ways around that.
big ways, enter dark money groups. These are usually nonprofits like 501c4s, which don't have to disclose their donors.
I see. So the dark money group collects secret donations.
And then makes a massive contribution to a super PAC. The super PAC reports the donation came from the nonprofit, not the original billionaire or corporation.
So the real source stays hidden. Anonymous.
Completely hidden from the public. Hundreds of millions flow this way into elections, pushing agendas, attacking opponents, all from the shadows. Zero accountability.
That's pretty corrosive to transparency.
Deeply corrosive.
Yeah.
And the result of all this, the super PACs, the dark money, is this incredibly cozy relationship.
Between the politicians and the big spenders.
Yeah. It's a clear feedback loop. Wealthy donors invest in candidates. Those candidates get elected. They then push policies.
Like tax cuts for the rich. Deregulation for specific industries.
Policies that directly benefit their donors. Which makes the donors richer, giving them more money to invest in the next election cycle.
Economic inequality breeds political inequality, which then worsens economic inequality.
It's a vicious self-reinforcing cycle. A brilliant system, really, if you're the one benefiting.
Okay, so the election is won, the candidate is in office. Does the influence stop there?
Oh, absolutely not. That's when the next phase kicks in. We move from the campaign trail into the halls of government itself.
On to the lobbyists. Lobbyists. Lawmakers by proxy.
We need to be clear here. This isn't just about advocating for a cause anymore. It's evolved.
How so?
It's become a system of direct participation in the legislative process, shaping laws from the inside out, often for the primary benefit of powerful economic interests. Policy capture, they call it.
Policy capture. How does that actually work? How do they capture the process?
Several ways. One key thing is providing expertise.
Expertise in quotes.
Well, yes. Look, legislation today is insanely complex. Healthcare, finance, tech, lawmakers and their staff can't be experts on everything.
Right, they're overworked, under-resourced sometimes.
Exactly. So who steps in? Lobbyists. Representing corporations, industry groups. They provide a constant stream of information, data, research papers, policy briefs, convenient case studies.
All designed to frame the issue in a way that benefits their client.
Of course. By becoming the go-to source, the indispensable partner, they gain trust and subtly steer the legislative solutions their way. It's incredibly effective.
But it goes beyond just providing information, right? You mentioned them actually writing the laws. It sounds wild.
It happens. It's a fundamental blurring of lines, but it's common practice. Lobbyists work hand in glove with policymakers and their staff.
Doing what?
Suggesting specific language, drafting amendments, sometimes even providing the initial text for entire bills, embedding loopholes, carving out exemptions right there in the legislative text.
So they're essentially embedding their interests directly into the legal code.
Directly. They'll even help organize committee hearings, suggest who should testify, maybe provide friendly witnesses with talking points, draft questions for the lawmakers to ask.
Shaping the entire debate and the official record.
It's a profound outsourcing of a core government function to private interests. Almost brazen when you think about it.
And then there's the revolving door.
Yeah.
People leaving government jobs.
And walking straight into high-paying lobbying jobs, often representing the very industries they used to regulate.
Why is that so effective?
Yeah.
Or maybe damaging?
Because they bring everything with them. Their connections, who to call, how to get a meeting, their insider knowledge, how the system really works, where the pressure points are, their access.
So they can manipulate decisions from the inside, using knowledge gained from public service for private profit.
It completely blurs the line between public duty and private enrichment, creates massive conflicts of interest, and it ensures corporate interests are represented by people who know exactly how to work the system because they were the system.
The end result of all this deep integration.
Policy capture, where the laws that emerge are designed primarily to boost corporate profits, sometimes directly at the expense of public health, safety, or the environment. It corrodes the whole purpose of democratic governance.
Okay, elections, legislation. What about the courts? Surely the judicial system is supposed to be above all this. Justice for sale, the elite's legal loophole.
Supposed to be. But even the judiciary, the branch designed to be most insulated from political and financial pressure, isn't immune. It's become another strategic target.
How can wealth influence the courts?
Multiple ways. Sometimes it's quite blatant. Look at patterns of presidential pardons or commutations.
Yeah.
There are documented cases across different administrations where wealthy political donors or their families, convicted of serious financial crimes, received clemency after making substantial contributions or, say, attending pricey fundraisers.
So, a direct link between donations and getting out of jail free.
The perception is certainly strong. It overtly suggests justice might be available on different terms if you have enough money and connections.
What about judges themselves, especially elected ones?
That's another huge vulnerability. In states where judges are elected, those races are attracting floods of cash. Millions of dollars from corporations, special interest groups, wealthy individuals.
People or companies who might actually have cases end up before those very judges.
Exactly. It raises massive questions about impartiality. Can a judge truly be unbiased when they know their campaign was funded by one of the litigants appearing before them? It just shreds public trust in a fair system.
But maybe the most powerful systemic influence isn't even in the courtroom itself. You mentioned big law.
Right. This comes from investigative work like David Enrich's book, Servants of the Damned. He exposes how elite corporate law firms wield enormous power.
How? What do they do?
They use their vast resources, armies of lawyers, immense wealth, deep political connections to create what Enrich calls a shadow justice system for their corporate clients.
A shadow justice system. What does that mean in practice?
It means going way beyond just defending clients in court. It's about helping them actively sidestep regulations, manipulate media narratives, whitewash their reputations, dodge taxes, hide money, basically operating outside the normal constraints of law and accountability.
That sounds incredibly cynical and dangerous.
It is. They use aggressive, scorched earth tactics, drowning opponents, often public interest groups or smaller plaintiffs, in endless legal paperwork and procedural delays until they run out of money.
And then they use a revolving door, too.
Massively. They hire former top officials straight from the Justice Department or regulatory agencies. These former officials then use their inside knowledge and contacts to lobby their old colleagues, often effectively neutralizing investigations or enforcement actions against the firm's clients.
Can you give an example?
Enrich detailed a potential criminal case against Walmart over its role in the opioid crisis. Allegedly, after Walmart hired lawyers who had just left senior positions at the DOJ, the case was significantly weakened, reduced to a civil matter.
So hiring the right ex-official can basically make legal problems disappear.
It can certainly help make them much smaller. It ensures that for the wealthiest clients, true accountability is often elusive. Justice becomes less about legal merit and more about who can afford the most formidable legal and political defense team.
Let's try and pull these threads together. Lobbyists co-writing laws, money influencing judges, elite law firms creating a shadow system. What's the bigger picture here?
The bigger picture is chilling. It's the effective privatization of core functions of the state.
Privatization. How so?
Think about it. Making laws. That's a core state function. But if lobbyists are heavily involved in drafting them, isn't that function partially outsourced to private interests?
Okay, I see that.
Administering justice, another core state function. But if elite law firms can manipulate the regulatory and legal process to shield their clients, aren't they effectively privatizing accountability for the super rich?
Creating a separate private system of rules.
Exactly. And even the democratic process itself selecting officials. If it's overwhelmingly dominated by private money through campaign finance, isn't that partially outsourced too?
So the influence isn't just about bending the rules.
It's about changing who performs the functions of the state, shifting power from public, accountable bodies to private, unaccountable ones.
And a result.
A multi-layered system of protection for the wealthy and powerful, a kind of permissionless space where they can operate with a degree of impunity that's simply unthinkable for ordinary citizens or smaller businesses. It dismantles the principle of equal justice under law for a select few.
That's profoundly anti-democratic.
It's the very definition of oligarchy, operating within the shell of democratic institutions.
And the influence doesn't stop at manipulating laws and courts. There's another whole dimension, right? In part 3, shaping minds, the control of information and ideology.
Absolutely, because arguably the most effective, most durable form of control isn't forcing people to do things, it's shaping how they think.
Shaping what they believe is possible or desirable or even true.
Exactly. This soft power operates in the realm of ideas, narratives, information. It sets the boundaries of acceptable debate. It legitimizes certain policies while making others seem unthinkable.
It manufactures consent for the status quo.
Precisely. Even if that status quo disproportionately benefits a tiny minority.
How is this achieved? What are the main tools?
2 primary strategies, deeply interconnected. First, the direct ownership and consolidation of the media, the megaphones.
Who gets to speak and how loudly?
And second, cultivating a vast and sophisticated idea industry, think tanks, advocacy groups, academic programs, all funded to produce and promote specific viewpoints.
So controlling the message and controlling the experts who deliver the message.
Together, they create an information ecosystem that amplifies elite perspectives and marginalizes dissenting voices. It builds the ideological scaffolding that holds the whole architecture up.
Let's start with the media. Ownership of the megaphone. Media consolidation and narrative control. A free press is supposed to be diverse, right? Holding power accountable.
That's the ideal, the cornerstone of democracy, a marketplace of ideas. But decades of deregulation and relentless mergers have gutted that ideal.
How badly?
Badly. We now have dramatic concentration. Most of the major media outlets, TV networks, newspapers, radio stations, even online platforms are owned by just a handful of massive corporations.
So the main sources of news and information for most people are controlled by very few entities.
Very few. And behind those entities, often some of the world's wealthiest billionaires.
Like who?
Well, you have figures like Rupert Murdoch with News Corp and Fox, Larry Ellison with a huge stake now in Paramount Skydance, Jeff Bezos owning the Washington Post, Elon Musk controlling X, formerly Twitter.
And these aren't passive investments, are they? They can influence the content.
They absolutely can, and evidence suggests they do. They have the undisputed power to shape editorial direction, hire and fire key personnel, and set the overall tone and worldview of their outlets.
What are the concrete effects of this concentration?
2 main things stand out in the research. First, homogenization.
Meaning all the news starts to sound the same.
Pretty much. Studies show that when one company owns multiple newspapers or TV stations, the news coverage across those outlets becomes much more similar. Less diversity in topics, focus, perspective. It shrinks the range of information available to you, the citizen.
Okay, less variety. What's the second effect? More worrying.
Bias. Direct promotion of the owner's financial or political interests.
So the news coverage reflects the owner's agenda.
It can, subtly or not so subtly. Remember the example of Murdoch's News Corp buying the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah.
Afterwards, studies found the journal's coverage of News Corp's competitors became significantly more negative compared to similar coverage in other papers like the New York Times.
Wow, using the newspaper as a weapon against business rivals.
It appears so. And political shifts happen too. The editorial stance of a paper can change dramatically after it's sold to an owner with different political leanings.
So who owns the megaphone directly impacts the tune being played. They set the agenda, frame the narrative.
At will, advancing their own interests under the guise of objective news. It's a huge source of power over public opinion.
An information bottleneck, which leads to the other side of this, the idea industry, the think tank to policy pipeline.
Right, because controlling the news outlets is powerful, but controlling the expert ideas that feed into the news and into policy debates is arguably even more fundamental.
The idea industry, what exactly is that?
It's this sprawling network, think tanks, advocacy groups, university centers, journals largely funded by wealthy donors and corporations,
And their purpose?
to produce research, analysis, and policy recommendations that align with the funders' ideological and financial interests, and then to aggressively market those ideas.
So it's like an assembly line for policies favored by the wealthy.
That's a good analogy. One study looking at education policy found venture philanthropists have basically built integrated networks of these organizations, think tanks, advocacy groups, media outlets designed specifically to push their preferred reforms, like charter schools or standardized testing, into law.
They present themselves as objective research institutions, right? Neutral experts.
Often, yes, and the public often perceives them that way. But many function less like traditional independent scholars and more like idea orchestrators.
Orchestrators.
Yeah. Their main job isn't necessarily generating new knowledge through open inquiry. It's collecting, packaging, and promoting research sometimes of debatable quality or objectivity that supports a pre-existing agenda.
They're conduits, linking private money and interests directly to policymakers and the public debate.
Exactly. Acting as validators, giving an intellectual sheen to what are often just self-interested policy preferences.
The Koch network is often held up as the prime example of this model, right? How does that work?
It's a really well-documented and sophisticated operation. Investigations show a deliberate three-phase strategy.
Okay, phase one.
Fund academics, usually at universities, to produce the raw materials, the foundational libertarian or free market theories, the economic models that support deregulation, tax cuts, etc.
Phase two.
Fund think tanks like the Cato Institute, Mercatus Center, Heritage Foundation to transform those raw academic ideas into marketable policies. Concrete legislative proposals, slick reports, sound bites for the media.
Turning theory into practical policy proposals.
Exactly. And phase three.
What's phase three?
Fund a massive network of advocacy groups and supposed citizens groups, like Americans, for prosperity to create political pressure from the ground up. Rallies, ad campaigns, lobbying efforts, pushing lawmakers to actually implement the policies developed by the think tanks.
Wow. From academic theory to grassroots pressure to enacted law, all funded by the same network.
Hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through this pipeline from the Kukuks and their allied donors. And this opacity of funding is a key feature across the think tank world. It's often hard to know who's paying for the research, but investigations often reveal big money from corporations, especially fossil fuels, defense, foreign governments, powerful foundations.
Raising huge questions about conflicts of interest and intellectual independence.
Massive questions.
So you've got the consolidated media amplifying certain narratives and this idea industry churning out expert support for those narratives. What's the combined effect?
The combined effect is the power to shape the Overton window.
The range of ideas considered acceptable or mainstream in political debate.
Exactly. This constant coordinated production and amplification of a particular worldview. Free markets good, regulation bad, taxes stifle growth, etc., makes these ideas seem like common sense, the only serious options on the table.
While other ideas,
Alternative perspectives may be about stronger social safety nets, environmental protections, wealth redistribution. They lack that same powerful institutional backing and media amplification. So they get marginalized, ignored, dismissed as radical, unrealistic, naive.
so the whole center ground of debate gets artificially shifted over time.
Systematically shifted, redefining what's politically possible to better align with the interests of the system's funders. It creates this really constrained intellectual environment.
And the danger here you mentioned is the erosion of epistemic authority. What does that mean?
It means we lose trust in expertise itself, when research is so often produced to serve an agenda rather than to find the truth.
How do you know who or what to believe?
Exactly. Policy debates devolve into battles over competing sets of facts, often funded by opposing interests. It polarizes society, undermines shared reality, and makes evidence-based policymaking almost impossible. It's incredibly damaging to informed public discourse.
Truly breaking down our ability to solve problems together.
Fundamentally.
And this whole architecture, the economic foundation, the political capture, the information control, it doesn't just operate within one country, does it? It goes global. Part 4, Global grand strategy, supranational, and philanthropic influence.
Right. The same dynamics play out on the international stage, shaping global rules, development agendas, and building consensus among a transnational elite.
Projecting that power across borders, how does that happen? What are the main channels?
We can think about three main vectors here. First, the built-in structural dominance of wealthy nations within the big international financial institutions, the IMF, the World Bank.
Okay, the official institutions.
Second, the relatively newer phenomenon of philanthrocapitalism, these mega foundations acting like global players, setting agendas.
Private power on a global scale.
And third, the role of exclusive elite forums, places where the powerful meet, network, and align their thinking.
So formal institutions, private foundations, and informal networks, all working to project influence globally.
Often bypassing traditional democratic checks and balances and reinforcing a global economic order that tends to benefit, well, those already at the top.
Let's start with the big institutions, governing global finance, the primacy of wealthy nations, the IMF, the World Bank. How are they structured to give wealthy nations more power?
It was baked in from the start, right after World War II. Their governance structures were explicitly designed to reflect the economic weight of the founding members. Power was tied to money.
How? What's the mechanism?
In the IMF, it's the quota system. A country's voting power isn't one nation, one vote. It's based on its financial contribution, its quota, which roughly reflects its size in the global economy.
So it's like a corporation where the biggest shareholders get the most votes.
Exactly like that. It institutionalizes the power of the creditor nations, primarily the wealthy countries of the global north, over the borrower nations, mostly in the global south.
Is it really that skewed? How unbalanced is it?
Profoundly unbalanced and deeply undemocratic. The United States alone controls almost 16.5% of the votes in the IMF.
16.5% for one country. Why is that number so significant?
Because major decisions at the IMF require an 85% supermajority to pass.
So 16.5% gives the U.S. effective veto power over anything truly fundamental.
Correct. And if you look at the top 10 members, the U.S., Japan, China, Germany, France, UK, etc., they collectively control over 55% of the vote.
Leaving the other 180-plus member countries with less than half the voting power combined.
A distinct minority say. This structure guarantees that the policies the IMF promotes, especially the conditions it attaches to loans, align with the interests of the dominant creditor nations.
And what kind of conditions are we talking about? When poorer countries need loans.
That's where structural adjustment comes in. The IMF often imposes really stringent conditions. Things like austerity, deep cuts to public spending, privatization of state-owned companies, deregulation of markets, opening them up to foreign investment and competition.
And the criticism is?
Critics argue these policies undermine national sovereignty, force countries to sell off valuable assets cheaply to foreign corporations, and often trap them in cycles of debt and dependency. It ensures the global financial system continues to operate on terms set by and favorable to the established economic powers.
So the very structure locks in that dominance.
By design.
Okay, that's the formal institutions. What about this newer force, the rise of philanthrocapitalism, agenda setting by decree?
This is a fascinating and controversial development. We're talking about these mega foundations, often created by tech billionaires, with endowments so huge they dwarf the GDPs of many countries.
And they operate differently from traditional charities.
Yes, they often apply business principles, metrics, strategic goals, venture capital-style investing to solve social problems. They aim for big, measurable impact.
Sounds good on the surface. Generous people trying to fix things.
And they certainly do achieve some good things. But it represents a new and largely unaccountable form of private power shaping global agendas.
The prime example, often cited, is the Gates Foundation.
Absolutely. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with an endowment north of $77 billion, is a behemoth in global health and agricultural development. Its financial clout is simply enormous.
Allowing it to do what?
Allowing it to effectively set global priorities, direct research funding towards its preferred solutions, and exert massive influence over international organizations like the World Health Organization.
Wait, and how does a private foundation influence the WHO? Isn't that run by governments?
Nominally, yes. But the Gates Foundation is one of the WHO's largest single funders, providing a huge chunk of its operating budget, especially for specific programs.
So money talks.
Yeah.
Loudly.
Very lively. They have dedicated teams whose job is explicitly to work with institutions like the WHO, UNICEF, the Global Fund, to align their strategies with the Gates Foundation's priorities.
So a private, unelected foundation based in Seattle is shaping public health policies for billions of people around the world.
That's the reality. It's an incredible amount of influence stemming from private wealth operating outside traditional democratic accountability structures.
What are the main criticisms of this model, beyond the lack of accountability?
Several big ones. It's inherently anti-democratic. One wealthy individual or a small board decides global priorities without public input, especially from the people affected.
Okay.
It can be paternalistic, the assumption that problems in the global south are best solved by experts and money from the global north.
Implying local knowledge or solutions aren't valued.
Potentially, yes. And it can be amateuristic, the belief that being successful in business automatically qualifies you to solve incredibly complex social problems like poverty or disease, which often have deep political and historical roots.
And does it push a particular worldview?
It can, sometimes inadvertently, promoting Western-centric models of development, like the push for industrial agriculture in Africa through initiatives like AGRA.
What's the concern there?
Critics say it increases dependency on expensive seeds and fertilizers from multinational corporations, potentially harms biodiversity, and undermines more sustainable, locally adapted farming methods, possibly harming long-term food security rather than helping it.
So, agenda setting by decree, potentially with unintended negative consequences.
Even with the best intentions, the model itself has inherent flaws and risks.
Okay, formal institutions, private philanthropy. What's the third leg of this global influence stool? Elite fora and consensus building, the spirit of Davos.
This is about the power of networks and shared understanding among the global elite. Think of those exclusive, invitation-only gatherings.
Davos, the World Economic Forum.
Davos is the most famous example. But also the Bilderberg meetings, the Trilateral Commission, places where top figures from business, finance, government, media, academia all gather.
What actually happens there? Are they making bunch of decisions?
No, not usually. Their power isn't legislative. It's more subtle, but hugely significant.
How so?
Their main function is fostering dialogue, building informal personal networks, and, crucially, synchronizing agendas, creating a shared consensus
A consensus on what?
on the big global challenges and, importantly, the preferred solutions. The Bilderberg Group, for example, is pretty explicit that its goal is to bolster a consensus around free market Western capitalism,
So they get the world's most powerful people in a room for off-the-record chats.
to talk, frankly, build relationships, and develop a common mindset, a shared framework for understanding the world, which then influences the decisions they make back in their respective companies, governments, or media outlets.
And is there a particular ideology pushed in these circles? Like at Davos?
One key concept heavily promoted by the WEF is multi-stakeholder governance.
Multi-stakeholder, meaning?
Meaning, moving away from traditional decision-making where national governments are the main actors towards a system where corporations, NGOs, foundations, other stakeholders get a formal seat at the global governance table.
Sounds inclusive. Maybe.
It's presented that way, but critics see it very differently. They call it a transition by stealth.
Why stealth?
Because it subtly shifts power away from democratically elected governments towards unelected corporate leaders and other self-selected elites. It legitimizes the idea that corporations should have a formal role in making public policy decisions that affect everyone, but without the direct democratic accountability that governments theoretically have.
So it's blurring the lines between public and private power at the global level, too.
Exactly. Which leads to this idea of a dual system of global governance.
Dual system.
You have the formal system, the UN, IMF, World Bank, dominated by states, albeit disproportionately by wealthy ones. And alongside it, or intertwined with it, you have this informal system dominated by a transnational class of billionaires, CEOs, and their foundations and networks.
And the elite forums are where these two systems meet and merge.
They're key bridging points, yes. Actively working to integrate corporate power more formally into global governance, but on terms favorable to that elite. It creates this really opaque power structure where accountability gets diluted. Who's really making the decisions? Who do they answer to?
And does this whole global setup echo older power structures? Colonialism, maybe.
That's a really potent critique, and some groups, like Oxfam, make that connection explicitly. They argue the current international financial system, with its debt burdens and structural adjustment policies imposed by global North institutions on the global South,
is essentially a continuation of colonial-era wealth extraction, just using different tools.
Precisely. Debt instead of direct rule. Intellectual property laws that benefit rich countries' corporations. Philanthropic agendas set in the North. It functions as a kind of neocolonialism, maintaining economic dominance and resource flow from south to north.
It's a stark perspective. Old power dynamics persisting in modern, more sophisticated forms.
It shows how deep these structures run, historically and globally.
Okay, we've covered a massive amount of ground: the economic base, the political capture, the information control, the global reach. Let's try to bring it all together in part 5. The system and the struggle synthesis and countervailing forces.
Right. Because the key insight is that these aren't separate issues. They're all interconnected parts of a single dynamic system.
An interlocking directorate of power, a self-reinforcing system.
Exactly. Advantages in one area are used to gain advantages in others. It feeds on itself.
Let's trace that loop one more time, clearly.
Okay. Starts with extreme economic power, part 1. Generated and amplified by monopoly and market concentration.
Got it. Foundation of fortune.
That economic power is then systematically converted into political power. Part 2. Campaign finance, lobbying, legal capture, buying influence over the rules.
Is shaping the state.
That political power then predictably leads to policies that favor the wealthy. Tax cuts, deregulation, weak labor laws.
Policies that benefit the donors and the powerful.
Which, in turn, further increases the wealth and market power concentrated at the top, magnifying their economic clout.
Which then provides even more resources to deepen their political and informational control, part 3.
And project that power globally, part 4. Restarting the cycle, but at a higher intensity each time. It's a relentless, accelerating feedback loop.
A vicious cycle, really.
Vicious for those outside it, certainly.
And you stressed earlier, this doesn't require some secret, centralized conspiracy to work.
No. Its coherence comes from shared interests, a shared ideology, usually some form of free market fundamentalism in these dense social networks.
The networks forged in elite universities, on corporate boards, at places like Davos.
Exactly, where a common understanding, a consensus view among the powerful is constantly reinforced. It's emergent coherence, driven by shared incentives and worldview, not necessarily top-down command.
And the system's strength, its resilience, comes from its complexity, its opacity.
Precisely. It's not one single lever of power. It's this dense thicket of influence. Interlocking corporations, law firms, foundations, think tanks, media, all working, consciously or unconsciously, in ways that tilt the playing field.
Which makes it really hard for the public to even see the whole picture, let alone challenge it effectively.
Right. Taking down one corrupt politician or exposing one bad company, it might feel satisfying, but it often does little to change the underlying architecture that produced them in the first place. The system just adapts and continues.
That sounds incredibly bleak, almost deterministic. Is there any way to push back? Any hope?
Okay, crucial point here. Cracks in the architecture and pathways to reform. This system, however formidable, is not all-powerful. It's not absolute. It's not uncontested.
There are countervailing forces.
Absolutely. Always have been, always will be. Resistance, challenge, efforts to build alternatives, they're constantly happening. We have to acknowledge that to avoid despair.
What are the most important countervailing forces? Where does the pushback come from?
Well, historically and currently, one of the most powerful is social movements. Power from below.
People organizing collectively.
Yes. Movements born out of that feeling of alienation, exclusion, injustice. Think about major changes. Civil rights, labor rights, environmental protection. They didn't come from the elites graciously granting concessions.
They came from organized pressure from ordinary people demanding change.
Exactly. By building solidarity, creating powerful counter-narratives about what's wrong and what's possible, and strategically deploying their collective power, protests, boycotts, voting blocs, movements can disrupt the status quo, force issues onto the agenda, and win real concessions. They show that power doesn't only flow from the top down.
Okay, people power. What else?
In this age of controlled information, truly independent investigative journalism, unmasking the shadows is absolutely vital.
Groups like ProPublica, the ICIJ.
Yes, organizations dedicated to digging deep, following the money, exposing the hidden workings of power that the elite would much rather keep secret.
Like the Panama Papers, Pandora Papers.
Those kinds of massive leaks and investigations were crucial. They pulled back the curtain on the secret offshore world used by leaders and billionaires to hide wealth and avoid taxes. That kind of exposure fuels public outrage, undermines legitimacy, and can create real pressure for reform. It's a critical democratic function.
So shining a light in the dark corners. And then there are concrete policy ideas,
Yeah.
right? Ways to actually change the structures, structural reforms, reclaiming the levers of power.
Yes, because challenging the system requires more than just protest or exposure. It requires changing the rules of the game. The focus here is on breaking that self-reinforcing cycle at key points.
Like with taxes.
Exactly. Tax policy is crucial. Proposals like progressive wealth taxes on the massive fortunes of the ultra-rich, or taxing the annual growth in their assets mark to market, not just when they sell them.
What's the goal there, beyond just raising revenue?
It's also about directly reducing the sheer concentration of wealth that fuels political influence, and potentially blunting the incentive for purely extractive, rent-seeking corporate behavior if supernormal profits are taxed more heavily, perhaps through a properly graduated corporate tax rate.
Okay, taxes. What about the political influence itself? Campaign finance.
Campaign finance reform is key to breaking the link between wealth and political access. One promising model is small donor public financing.
How does that work?
Basically, small donations from ordinary citizens get matched with public funds, maybe 6 to 1 or even more.
So a $50 donation becomes $350 for the campaign.
Exactly. It massively amplifies the power of regular people, makes candidates focus on building broad support instead of chasing a few mega donors, and reduces that dependency that leads to policy capture.
Reclaiming the political process. And what about the corporate concentration that started this whole cycle?
That's where antitrust enforcement comes in. There's a growing movement to seriously revitalize antitrust laws, laws designed to prevent monopolies and promote competition.
Breaking up huge companies, blocking anti-competitive mergers.
Yes, going after monopolies and oligopolies much more aggressively. The idea is to restore genuine competition to the market, making it harder for a few dominant firms to extract monopoly rents and amass the kind of wealth that distorts the entire system.
So tax the wealth, clean up politics, break up monopolies, targeting the core mechanisms of the cycle.
That's the strategy, aiming for structural change, not just tinkering around the edges.
But enacting these kinds of fundamental reforms, that's a huge political battle, isn't it?
Massive. Because ultimately this is a battle of narratives.
How so?
The current system is held up by powerful stories, powerful ideologies. The myth of meritocracy, they earned it. The idea that what's good for shareholders is good for everyone. The narrative that government is always inefficient and bad, while the private sector is always efficient and good. The Tina argument, there is no alternative.
These stories justify the status quo.
Exactly. They legitimize inequality and concentrated power. So the success of any reform movement depends on building and promoting a compelling counter-narrative.
A story that exposes the flaws, highlights the injustice, and articulates a clear, positive vision for a different kind of society. More democratic, more equitable.
Precisely. That counter-narrative, championed by social movements, amplified by investigative journalism, is what creates the political will needed to overcome the immense resistance and enact those structural reforms. It's a fight for hearts and minds as much as for laws.
Okay, let's try to wrap this deep dive up. We've explored this intricate architecture of influence,
Built on extreme wealth,
converted into political and legal dominance,
reinforced by control over information and ideology.
and projected globally through institutions and networks. It's not just a theory, is it?
No, it's a systemic reality. A sophisticated interlocking system that is actively shaping the world you, the listener, live in every single day. The opportunities you have, the information you receive, the rules you follow.
Which brings us to what feels like the central challenge.
I think it is. Addressing the corrosive, democracy-distorting influence of extreme wealth concentration? It's arguably the fundamental challenge for maintaining any semblance of genuine democratic governance in the 21st century.
Because when policy consistently answers to billionaires instead of the public,
When justice seems to operate on a sliding scale based on wealth,
when the information environment is dominated by a few powerful interests,
then the very idea of self-government, of rule by the people, starts to look pretty shaky. It's imperiled.
So we want to leave you with a question to really wrestle with, a provocative thought, maybe.
Go for it.
When the very framework of our society, the laws, the economy, the stories we tell ourselves, seems increasingly designed, implicitly or explicitly, to serve the interests of a tiny, incredibly wealthy minority, what happens to the promise of real democracy? And maybe more importantly, how do we collectively start to reclaim the levers of our shared destiny?
That's the question, isn't it? How do we reclaim those levers?
Something to mull over. We really encourage you to keep exploring these issues, keep questioning, stay engaged.
Because understanding the problem is the first step. The path forward needs that clear-eyed recognition and then the courage to demand and enact real fundamental change.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been quite the journey.
Until next time, stay curious and stay engaged.